Before we get going, I wrote an article on Sunday, how Islam Makhachev defended the crown. Not only the Makhachev stuff, you got obviously the kicks. We'll talk about that in a minute, but we got the hand fighting in the clinch. We got some other stuff from the other fights on the card that I thought was cool. I'm going to reference it, but if you want to go read that, / listen to it because it's got an audio track, sign up to the Patreon, go check it out. Let's go. Oi, oi, it's your boy Jack Slack, and I'm going to reserve some of my enthusiasm today because the last time I got enthusiastic for something was UFC 294, and that one stank out the joint. The whole joint, the whole of Abu Dhabi just smells of that girl's staph-infected bits. My word. Talk about promising and failing to deliver. UFC 294. Now, I think I've done this once before. It might have been the last Abu Dhabi card even, or the last one that Islam Makhachev fought on. I was like, he did his job. Everyone else. Man. Oh, man. No, there's a few fun things on this card. There was some cool technical stuff on this card. But a lot of it was overshadowed by the fact that Abu Dhabi is the Wild West in terms of organising fistfights. There were a few things here. Everyone knows about Javid Basharat versus Victor Henry. There was also just some bizarre officiating in a couple of fights where guys were just allowed to cheat constantly. 2 no contests, never great. If you don't know, I mean, this ties in with something that's going around on Twitter at the moment. I'm seeing a lot of people post payouts again with big yellow letters and numbers saying what each fighter got paid. They're not true. The UFC doesn't release payouts whenever they have the chance because they don't want people to know how much or how little the fighters are making. The only places that force them to release payouts are California and, weirdly enough, Utah, but only sometimes. So with the majority of fights in Nevada, you don't get to hear anything about that. And anytime they go to Europe, probably not going to hear about that. And when they go to Abu Dhabi, they're especially not going to hear about that because there's no commission in Abu Dhabi. The UFC acts as their own commission. So if you see anyone posting those sort of numbers, don't engage, actually, because it's just engagement bait by people who've bought blue ticks hoping to get some of that Elon Musk money. And more importantly, don't then follow up when someone like Luke Thomas says, no, there's no possible way these can be right because they aren't released. Don't follow up by going, but they seem about right. Because that helps no one. That's just stupid beyond belief. But also by acting as their own commission, the UFC has control over who can and can't fight, obviously. There are some people on this card who mysteriously haven't been seen outside of this Abu Dhabi card in a while. So obviously Khamzat Chimaev took a year off. Around about the time that USADA stopped announcing when fighters had failed tests. There could obviously be other reasons that he took the time off, but just bear that in mind. And then the other really notable one was Sharo Magomedov, who they've been trying to get to debut for ages. They've had him signed for like a year, it seems, at this point. And they got him on this Abu Dhabi card. Obviously, Dagestani, well-liked in Abu Dhabi. He's their demographic. And if you've seen any interviews with him or just, looked at a picture of him, one of his eyes, quite obviously messed up. Much more visibly obvious than someone like a Michael Bisping or whatever. I don't think I saw a single person ask him, like, are you on this card because you can't get medically cleared to fight in the States? And that brought up a load of interesting stuff about, like, the history of one-eyed fighters. There's been a few. Obviously, Michael Bisping won the middleweight title while lying to the doctors about what he could see on the eye chart. Harry Greb fought an entire career, went blind in 1921 and fought like 100 more fights and only lost 5, including beating, like, Gene Tunney, future heavyweight champion of the world. Joe Frazier obviously had cataracts in one eye and lost vision in the other. But yes, by acting as their own commission, the UFC can let people fight who otherwise might not get cleared. But furthermore, they get to choose the doctor. And if you saw the doctor on this card, he was doing his job, I would say, erratically. Came out after Victor Henry got kicked in the dick pretty badly. He was retching and then obviously went to hospital throwing up in the back of an ambulance. He was telling him that he didn't get kicked in the groin, which is, of course, no part of the doctor's job. The doctor's job is to tell you if something's actually wrong, if a fighter can continue. Examine them if necessary. Obviously, you can't get someone's balls out on TV, but you could ask for a towel or something. I mean, it's like examining eyes, making sure that people aren't bleeding into their eyes, not making sure that the fighter is not compromised, not telling him that he hasn't been kicked there. And then, of course, he asked Johnny Walker, apparently, where are you? And Johnny Walker said, in the desert. And he waved the fight off. I think that I've got mixed feelings about this one because I have always just said Abu Dhabi, and I would have to think for a second and go, oh yeah, obviously in the United Arab Emirates. But I think in the desert is a pretty fine and funny and Johnny Walker type answer. But anyway, yeah, you got DC on commentary going, oh my God, this doctor, as if the UFC didn't choose him, as if he wasn't someone they found and put in there. Hilarious. Then, of course, it came out that that girl had staph infection on her pussy, and Mike Breeden had a staph infection somewhere else. And fair enough if you pass the medical with something that's like in an intimate place and the doctor isn't going to ask to check. But Mike Breeden had a fucking cut under his eyebrow, exactly where it's going to start bleeding into his eye, and they let him fight. Just the most slapdash shit. We're supposed to trust them being their own commission because nobody's died yet, but they are pretty shit at being their own commission. The man who delivered, the man of the hour, the man with the power, too sweet to be sour, Islam Makhachev. He did fantastically. Last week, I did an article that was open to everyone called Returning to Makhachev Volkanovski 1. There was some stuff in there. I talked about some of the interesting bits of that first matchup. The first matchup was exciting because both of them had success where they weren't supposed to. And yet the UFC ran with a promo package that was like, a lot of people scored it for Volkanovski, and like even Volkanovski's mates didn't score it for Volkanovski. The intrigue was in the matchup of the techers and the strats. It wasn't in how the scoring of the first fight went down. There was enough there that you went, man, Volkanovski could build on that. But there was enough there that you could go, Islam Makhachev could build on that. And one of the things that Islam Makhachev could build on was his success with the left leg kicking game. Talked about that briefly in the article. Talked about that, I think, on the last Boycast quite extensively. But Makhachev, I've said it before, he's somewhat lacking in some areas as a striker, and then makes up for it in other areas. Volume, he's not great with. Combination striking, he's not great with. What he is good at is sneaking things in. So he'll show one punch and throw another. Even in this fight, he does that thing where he throws his left shoulder forward as if to throw his southpaw left straight, and then he loops the hand around, so it's a longer, slower punch, but it goes right around the guy's parry. That was the one good punch he threw in this fight, was that one. Check out my Twitter for clips of Nazim Hamed doing that, Prince Nazim back in his prime. But the left leg kicking game has always been successful for him, but he's never... The way I put it in my article was like he always used it enough that it was part of his game, but he never abused it as ruthlessly as someone with all his wrestling advantages should. He doesn't really need to be scared of people taking him down. He's good enough at fighting off one leg, fighting off a takedown attempt on one leg. And he's probably good enough at getting up if he's spent years underneath Khabib. Those are the two things that should stop you from kicking all the time. And, they don't exist for him against most opponents. And wouldn't you know it, his coaches clearly went back. I would guess probably AKA guy, what's his name, Xavier Mendez? But his coaches went back. They looked at that first fight. They said, yeah, you landed a load of left kicks. 10 or 11 through the fight went in unanswered. Why are you not doing that more? If it's landing and it's free, you should be abusing that. Comes out in this fight, within the first minute, 6 left kicks. Nothing else. No other strikes, just left kicks. I mean, that shows you how much he could get away with it. It is something you can ruthlessly exploit, particularly when you're dealing with a height and range advantage. And just don't... If you're a big Islam Makhachev fan, calm your tits. I'm not saying he's a size bully. He was fighting a smaller man in this, but that's the dynamic of the matchup. By recognizing that, you can then bring that to lever on the fight. It would be dumb of him to not take advantage of his height and length advantage. Which is why you saw him in both of these fights. Well, this one more than the last one, the kicking the body and the head with his rear leg. This fight and last fight, looking for the double collar tie at every point. Anytime Alexander Volkanovski's head is slightly lower, grab it and try and knee him. These are things that come free with a height advantage, and you should be using as much as possible. So keeping Volkanovski out on the end of those kicks was great. The other great thing about it was that Islam Makhachev is not a very aggressive fighter most of the time. He's a very, that has been always the big comparison between him and Khabib. He might even be more technically slick than Khabib. He's certainly a more slick striker on the feet than Khabib, but Khabib was all aggression every moment of the fight, and Islam Makhachev is much more laid back. But by coming out and going, I'm going to kick and I'm going to kick often, he had to be on the front foot. You can't chill on the back foot and kick because you run the risk of the guy crowding you, putting you towards the fence, stepping up the middle when you kick. by going so kick heavy. I mean, you can do like a lazy kick and run away sort of plan, but you won't get many kicks off. You'll get a few kicks off, and you have to try and do like prime Machida, prime Wonder Boy, lower the amount of engagements and win that way. But Makhachev wanted to kick lots, so he had to be on the front foot. He pushed Volkanovski back to the fence almost immediately, and that kept Volkanovski from attacking effectively. He threw 4 strikes in this fight, and none of them to the head. Now, after the first article, I was like, and rewatching the first fight, I said, I really hope Volkanovski's got something else to deal with a southpaw than that shifting right hook, because he has to step through. It's a really big step. It's a really big movement, and Makhachev was countering him in the first fight. I mean, he landed a few, and he did stun Makhachev off one at one point, but it's a very defensively vulnerable move. He leaves himself open for stuff, and he didn't even get that going in this fight. But yeah, if you're a southpaw fighting an orthodox fighter, and you've got a reach and range advantage, hammering the left kick in, great idea. Using front kicks, particularly to the body, instead of round kicks to the body, much reduces the chance of them even trying to, or, not a lot of people try and take down Makhachev, so not a lot of people are going to try and take him down off a caught kick. But it makes it a lot harder to catch a good kick if they're throwing front kicks to the body instead of round kicks to the body. You're going to be standing deeper in on them. If they throw a round kick against your body and you catch it against your body. If they throw a front kick, you're on the end of it. And they've got their knee between you and them. And with someone like Volkanovski, who needs to close the distance, throwing round kicks is asking them to step up the inside and try and hit you on one leg, which is obviously not great. We'll talk about that in a bit with Sharon Magomedov, because he got caught off the same thing twice. Both the takedowns in that fight, people were like, oh, terrible takedown defense. But he got caught on one leg because he showed what he was doing twice, and Bruno Silva read it. Other cool stuff in that fight. I mean, I said this in the article, but first half of the article was about cool. He did the kicks and he used them and he set up the high kick. But the second half of the article was about even in losing, Volkanovski brought something interesting into that fight that he learned from the first fight. In the first fight, he was doing decently in clinches, getting an underhook and turning Makhachev onto the fence. Makhachev, very good at fighting with his back to the fence. Probably no one in the world better at that position right now. But Makhachev will look for the big whizzer throws and throw that annoying knee to the body. Volkanovski sort of backed out of that in the first fight, but sort of like in a way that he didn't want anything to do with it. And I was really intrigued by the idea of him doing what he did against Hirota and Kennedy early in his UFC career. Clinch, push to the fence, free your arms and start swinging. And he tried that once, and Makhachev grabbed a collar tie on the way out. He slipped his arm free of the armpit. Again, go read the article because you can see pictures of this, and it's not very clear what I'm saying. Volkanovski had the underhook along the cage. He slipped his elbow free to try and free his hand to hit, and Makhachev clamped the glove in his armpit and chased him, grabbed his head with the other hand and hit him with a knee, immediately grabbed the double collar tie, 2 hands behind the head, and started threatening there too. And you saw Volkanovski had to go back to the fence to defend himself, turn Makhachev around. Double collar tie, really dangerous position. And Makhachev's one of the few guys in MMA who's really using it well at the moment. Back in the day, it was Shootbox would do it lots. Verdum would do it lots. They did it in a way where they'd throw punches to get you covering up and then grab your head even around your arms. But there's guys like Demetrius Johnson was very good at this, just getting it off the clinch with their back to the fence. Makhachev has been fantastic with the double collar tie throughout his UFC career. And against an opponent the same height, if they build their, they posture up, you can land some knees to the body and you can look to improve your position. But against a shorter opponent, you can really lean on them. And even if they're standing upright, all you need is to get your hips away from them a bit and throw a knee up the middle. So it's sort of a perfect storm because he's great at the double collar tie, plus Alex Volkanovski is a few inches shorter than him. That makes it easier. But yeah, for all I'm talking about with the pummeling and the hand fighting, go read the article. Terrific performance from Makhachev. Obviously, the short notice thing is a bit... I said this about Chimaev versus Usman. I say this every time there's a short notice replacement, even if it is an absolutely banging matchup. It's like, I want to see the best fight the best with full time to prepare for each other. I want to see what they can bring. Taking a fight against the best guy in the world, a weight class up, on 12 days' notice, probably never a good idea. I imagine they will look, Volkanovski's the sort of fighter and they're the sort of team that they would have looked at the Makhachev fight, the first one, almost immediately after losing it and worked on stuff from it. But it's still not ideal to have a fight like that, a fight of such importance between such good fighters take place at such short notice. But Makhachev, it showed he had the read, because whenever you see Makhachev kick that actively, never. They spotted that in the first fight. They took it into the second fight, and he really did just, yeah. He's a bit of a robot. You know, when he's on the microphone, he has negative charisma, but you put in the instructions and he just does it flawlessly. Your co-main was Usman versus Chimaev, another one that was like, yeah, I quite like this short notice replacement. I mean, Makhachev versus Oliveira, you lost the two best lightweights in the world fighting each other, or two of the best. I don't know if Oliveira is actually, you know, number 2 in the world, but he's in that top level. Chimaev versus Usman, you know, actually a more sensible matchup. Obviously, the short notice thing does again undermine it, but it was Chimaev versus Paulo Costa, who, you know, hasn't really done a lot lately and did seem like a weird sort of layup welcome to middleweight. I thought this was a really interesting fight because it was Khamzat Chimaev against someone who has the skills to test what Chimaev's actually good at. And you saw that. There were a good few shots stuffed in this match. He had some trouble on the feet. But I was still really impressed by Khamzat Chimaev. I think this is probably the most impressed I've been by him. He is still sort of limited as a striker, but then Kamaru Usman is too, and he had great success. Your first round, you had a great takedown, just basically like prime Khabib tenacity. Dive in on the leg, chase them to the fence, get on Usman's back. That's not really a Khabib thing, but get on Usman's back. What I really liked when Usman was in the 4-point or the quad pod or whatever you want to call it, when he's on his hands and knees and trying to build up, Chimaev was on his back and he was reaching down over Usman's shoulders. Normally you see guys try and stay under the shoulders, keep underhooks, keep the body lock or whatever, so that they don't slide over the top when the other guy puts their bum in the air. You see guys go to the quad pod and then put their bum up in the air, and the other guy will slide off the back. Epidemic of guys just sliding off the back by accident in no-gi and MMA. But Chimaev was reaching down over Usman's shoulders, but then picking his hands up off the mat, which is something that Islam Makhachev does. It's really good. It's like wrestling in a jiu-jitsu-y position. I think the really interesting thing about this is that obviously Khamzat Chimaev's grappling is awesome in one regard, but then in another regard, he was not really finishing the rear naked choke very well. And there were whole points in this fight where Usman would just tuck his chin, turn his head to one side or the other based on what hand Chimaev was putting in, and continue trying to work his way back out of the back mount. Kamaru Usman never looked really concerned about getting choked until the one attempt got a little bit deeper, and he did that front flip, which honestly, I haven't had cause to talk about it for a while, but that's the one that does scare me a bit. People get spiked accidentally a lot in MMA, or a fair amount, but that's the one that almost always someone comes down really badly in a sort of, oh, is that going to ruin their spine for life way? And it could be either guy, because when you're trying to do it, you ideally you want to do a front flip and they get peeled off or whatever, they go to face first. But Kamaru landed on his head and Chimaev was largely okay. It's a scary position. I can see someone getting really fucked up doing that. I can't remember who it was in the UFC doing like front flips from there. I think it was someone with Yushin Okami on there, or maybe it was Yushin Okami with someone on his back. If so, it would be the one fun Yushin Okami moment in the octagon. But anyway, he ended up fighting off chokes for most of the first round. Not an awful lot of damage done, but yeah, pretty convincing Chimaev round. Really interesting to see whether people gave it a 10-8 or not, because again, not much damage done. Second round, Usman stopped some shots, which was really nice. Mostly just picking at each other on the feet. Chimaev's game on the feet, aside from being big and powerful, is like, from orthodox he throws an overhand across the top. From southpaw he throws a jab and a left body kick, and that's about it. It's more because people have such it's such a handful dealing with the wrestling that they lose sight of just how limited it was. They don't even get to notice how limited his game is on the feet. Interestingly, I thought Usman had success with a couple of good front kicks to the body that seemed to slow Khamzat down a bit. And he also had success with calf kicks. But one of the really interesting things was, because they were both switching stances, Usman would calf kick orthodox versus orthodox. But when they went southpaw versus southpaw, he wouldn't. And I was like, are you just not comfortable doing that? Because you should just be hammering both legs if they're there for free. Hard to get taken down on kicks below the knee, unless you really fuck it up. Basically, the big moment of round two was he kept doing the reach for the lead leg, because if you watch Khamzat Chimaev's shot, it's like GSP has the most successful double in MMA history, probably. Never went to a knee. always leaned forward at the waist, which is not really that useful in high school wrestling or freestyle wrestling or anything like that, because guys are already standing so low. But obviously, if you box your way into it, if you're jamming guys and then you get in like that, it's a lot easier to finish. So it was very much, everyone was like, oh my God, he never wrestled as a child, but he is amazing at MMA wrestling. And yeah, that was just MMA wrestling. Whereas there are guys like Khamzat and Habib back in the day will go to the knee and just dive at people. And Kamaru Usman has no knees, so he will absolutely not do that. He does the snatch single a lot, and he always has. He just reaches down with both hands for the lead leg. And it makes people pull their leg back, and it makes them twitchy and susceptible to getting hit. And he did it a few times in that second round, and then he faked it and went 1-2, and he cracked Chimaev right on the chin. Probably the best shot of the fight. And then Chimaev hit a nice takedown. He really does. He does them near enough the fence that he can drive right to it. It's really impressive because he shot in, and Kamaru, he shot in on one leg, and Kamaru freed that leg, but the cage was behind him, and Khamzat ended up low on the other leg. Don't see that a lot. Shooting a single and ending up with the other leg. But then that was 20 seconds left in the round. He got the takedown into side control because Usman was holding the chest wrap, which doesn't give you an awful lot of opportunities to do much. I was watching, I think it was Kyle Dake at the Worlds the other day, or Kyle Dake's last loss or whatever. The guy keeps shooting low singles, and Kyle Dake keeps chest wrapping him, and they get sort of stuck for a while, and that's it. Like, he can't do any clever counters because he's chest wrapped him. But yeah, it meant that Khamzat didn't really land anything of note. So that second round is a weird one, because do you give it to Khamzat for the takedown? Do you give it to Kamaru for landing two good shots on the feet? I had the feeling that they were going to score it for Khamzat. I think most of them didn't, which I was pleased by. Let me check MMA decisions. Only Vito Paulio gave Chimaev the second round. The other two judges, Derek Cleary and David Letherby, gave Usman the second round. And in the third round, Usman basically got it into a brawl, it was kind of disappointing because I felt like he did good work with low kicks and body work, but because he'd had the takedowns in round 1 and round 2, he was very much in I've got to finish this fight mode, and he was just swinging for the head. And Chimaev, because he's got this amazing chin and he has knocked out basically everyone he trades with, he was taking the punches and throwing back, and I think Usman got the better of most of the trades. But yes, 2 judges gave it to Usman, 1 judge gave it to Chimaev. All 3 of them gave it 10-8 for the first round. So Letherby had a 28-28 draw, which I could see. If you give the first round 10-8, I could see the draw. I could see Khamzat getting 2 rounds out of 3. I didn't see any 30-27 scores. There were a couple online. I'm looking at MMA decisions. Brian Knapp, Cody Mero, and Damian Bartonek all scored it 30-27 to Chimaev. One guy, Jake Noka, apparently, scored it 30-26 for Chimaev. That's impressive. Who knows? He might have just added MMA decisions as a troll. This was the event where I posted the photo of Johnny Walker walking around outside the arena in his shorts and no shoes, and said that he'd been escorted to the border and then executed. Yeah, I think it was an odd one because Kamaru Usman obviously he took it probably for money. There was probably an awful lot of money thrown at getting a replacement here. But I suspect he also wanted to get back in action because he had lost 2 to Leon Edwards. I think he has lost a step, and his knees do seem to be getting worse. But I still think he was a great test for Chimaev here, and Chimaev passed. Or didn't, depending on how you scored it. But I thought, yeah, both held their own. It was a fun little fight. I think definitely you would get an even more interesting fight out of that if it went 5 rounds, and definitely if they had full camps for each other, you could have a lot of fun with that. But they seem to really want the Chimaev title fight. He's just moved to Abu Dhabi, but they're big fans of him over there. He seems to be doing massive numbers on social media, but allegedly, in the course of trying to save this fight, or save a Khamzat fight for this card, they wanted Sean Strickland to defend the title on short notice. How insane is that? When have you ever heard of that? I mean, I've had my history of not enjoying Sean Strickland fights and being like, I hate this guy, I never want to see him fight. Anyone who loses to him is a bum. Brackets, read how Sean Strickland killed the king. But I think that's incredibly disrespectful to Sean Strickland to do that. Just nonsense. And also, like, they were saying the winner of this gets a middleweight title shot. It's like, that is also just really fucking stupid. Now, the answer to that from a lot of people will be, well, who do you think Chimaev or Khamzat doesn't, or actually annoying people use Boers. Who do you think Boers can't beat in the middleweight top 15? It's like, I've not seen him against a middleweight. I have no idea. Maybe fighting massive dudes makes a big difference. But I do know that Dricus du Plessis has put in a ton of work beating guys, beating everyone they put in front of him, including Robert Whittaker, one of the pound-for-pound most skilled fighters in the world, and the obvious number one contender before Sean Strickland won the belt. So it's daft to be doing that. Would happily watch Khamzat versus Whittaker in the meantime, though. Or they could do Khamzat versus someone like Vettori, which would be an instant, springboard to I've beaten a legit middleweight, who I definitely think he could beat, and into title contention. And you get a fun fight out of it because Vettori is basically a kickboxer who won fights on the terrible wrestling at the middleweight division. But he's tough as nails. So if Chimaev's punching him in the head, he's probably going to be there for a while. And he's a good enough wrestler and a big dude that he could test Chimaev's takedowns over 5 rounds in a Fight Night main event or whatever. But I don't think they're wasting Chimaev on Fight Nights. I think they're probably going to keep him on these big cards, unless it's like the Fight Night in Saudi Arabia that they've got lined up, where I expect even more bullshit from every part that should be run by the commission. Man, I shit on commissions a lot, but cards like this make you miss them. And that's my segue into the really silly stuff that happened on this card. In your co-main event, you had Ankalaev versus Johnny Walker. Ankalaev obviously coming off the draw with Jan Blachowicz that I thought was fine, but the UFC got really mad about and decided that neither fighter deserved to fight for the title in the next one. So that was a title fight for the vacant title, and then they were like, fuck it, Jamal Hill can have it. But honestly, I thought Johnny Walker looked good here. Landing low kicks for free on Ankalaev, who still doesn't seem to know how to deal with them. The shin-to-shin meta is here. We're kicking shin on shin. It's agony to watch. I don't know how they do it, especially these giant dudes, but hit him with the odd right hand and then the weird right back fist. Ankalaev got a takedown. Then, in, I presume, a moment of frustration, hit him with an illegal knee. And this was the second of the card or third on it. There was one in the Elliot Makhachev fight as well. That was, again, hands down, trying to get the hands off the floor. Honestly, it was easier when it was just all illegal. This half and half, is it bearing weight thing, I know it's designed to stop people playing the rules, but the thing is that a good knee strike is potentially fight-changing. So if it, you have to do this thing where the ref stops the fight and we all argue whether it's legal or illegal, where the weight was at the time and stuff. If you just make it back to that hard line, whether it's a knee or a hand down, if anything's down that's not the feet, you can't knee him in the head. Yeah, it's slightly less interesting, but who is using that well? Who is using the knees to the head well while the person's got their fingertips down or whatever? I suppose Grasso against Valentina, but that's, most of it is just one guy being surprised that it's legal and the other guy landing a couple of cheeky knees, or it actually being illegal and one guy getting no contested or DQ'd. Obviously, there was criticism of the doctor for the weird question that he asked and not liking Johnny Walker's response. But after watching him in the Victor Henry fight, I thought that doctor was going to try and keep everything going. So, yeah, unfortunate. But, it's light heavyweights. This shit happens all the time. They'll make a rematch. Hell, like, half of Ankalaev's career now has been just doing weird rematches that probably didn't need to happen, but were anyway. I say half. He spent 18 months fighting Ion Cutelaba twice. Ikram Aliskerov beat Wally Alves in a very predictable fight. Wally Alves is a welterweight who hasn't won in 2 years. And Ikram Aliskerov is a talented middleweight coming in whose only loss is to Khamzat and who has looked really good. This was one for the home crowd. It's that simple. And then afterwards, DC's going, oh, no one outside the top 15 can touch this guy now. And it's like based on his win over Wally Alves. This showed me nothing except that he knows how to finish someone well, because he knocked Alves down with a jab, threw a high kick along the fence, so Alves' hands were in goalposts on the sides of his head, and then he jumped up the middle with a knee and knocked him out. If you're going to jumping knee against the cage, is the time to do it, and when they've got their arms down the sides of their head protecting them from kicks. I like Askarov. I really liked what he was able to do against Phil Hawes, even while having trouble in the early going, but this one was just like, what's the point of this fight? I don't think it was even a late replacement. Oh, I suppose it was a replacement. He was supposed to fight Imavov, which would have been quite interesting. Said Nurmagomedov versus Muin Gafarov, just the stupidest fight I've ever seen. Gafarov, I already knew he fought like a dummy from his last fight, but Said Nurmagomedov, his whole thing is flicky kicks and a power guillotine. He has trouble if you put him under pressure and put him back to the fence, as what's his name, Kakramanov was able to. But Muin Gafarov just dives, like he chases him down by the fence, and instead of doing anything useful, he dives in behind his head with his neck out and just gives Said Nurmagomedov literally the easiest win of Said Nurmagomedov's career, probably. And then people are like, this Nurmagomedov's next level. It's the equivalent of someone slipping on a banana peel and you being like, I did that. Makhachev beat Tim Elliott in a fight that was interesting. As a dude who likes grappling, I enjoyed it. As a dude who gets frustrated by guys getting on top and doing nothing, both of them frustrated me. Again, you had some of that, were his hands down, were his hands not down bollocks with some knees. Both of them like to flail around on the feet, but the finish was good. Tim Elliott was in half guard, had the arm over the back. He was doing that tricky stuff we were talking about, threatening the guillotine, threatening to get up. But literally last week I said when Cub Swanson tried against Ricardo Lamas just pulled him down into an arm triangle, and that's what Makhachev got here. He just pushed his way up into mount with an arm triangle, got the choke. Impressive to submit Tim Elliott, always. And I think it worked out well. He's starting to get into like the guys who can actually do a bit of everything now. In the flyweight division, there are guys who can strike a bit and grapple a bit. And, when he starts fighting the Royvals, the Morenos, the whoever's not, Pantoja, guys who aren't the champion but are of a very high level, that's going to be interesting. Because for Makhachev, he's got the grappling and he doesn't really have striking. But if he's fighting someone who can strike and can't grapple that well, he's just going to run over them. And if he's fighting someone who grapples but can't strike that well, he doesn't really have anything to worry about because he's just going to be on the ground with them the entire time. So it really is, we need to see him against some all-rounders, and he just hasn't fought any. But if he keeps moving up, as he probably will, we're going to get one soon. Peak versus Yaya was very disappointing because Trevor Peak tried to fight well, and really what he should have been doing was being Trevor Peak. That's my DC's points for victory, be Trevor Peak. Cedric Dumas versus Abu Azaita was just awful. They're both terrible, and one of them was allowed to foul for free. Again, just the refs letting people foul all they want. That wasn't even like the local ref. That was either Goddard or Herzog. Mike Breeden versus Anshul Juby was fun. Anshul Juby, hype has like dissipated overnight, but I still like him. He's really tricky. Long, rangy. Actually, he isn't long. His arms are like 3 inches too short for what they should be. He's got a shorter reach than Volkanovski, and he's 6 foot tall. That's what I said last time. And he does. That's true. Uses his jab well, uses his kicks well. What he was doing really well was he was lancing Breeden up with straight blows, and then Breeden would duck his head and he'd grab the double collar tie and try to knee. It was the same stuff that we were talking about with Islam Makhachev. If the guy's shorter than you and he's trying to duck punches, you have to grab his head while it's down there and try and knee him. But then Mike Breeden came out in the third round barking like a dog and shouting USA, and Anshul Jubilee, I mean, there's got to be a level of adrenaline dump because I think this was his first, he's done a Contender Series fight, hasn't he? Was this his first UFC fight? No, he fought on the UFC Fight Night in his last one. But everyone kept calling it a debut. What? But yeah, he seemed to just, like, all the energy left him, and he started just fighting in a way that, a more experienced fighter, I feel like if they'd been getting touched up by Mike Breeden in that third round, they'd have gone, okay, well, enough of this, and they'd have got a clinch. Or they'd circle off and go, well, I've won 2 rounds, I'll take it easy, he can run at me if he wants. But Anshul Jubilee was standing there, like, trying to outstrike Breeden when he was getting clipped, and he was clearly getting, like, shaken by it, emotionally. And he's reaching for these awful single legs and stuff, and it's like, a more experienced fighter there would maybe throw a jab or something and duck and just hit the chest, get in on the chest, make a clinch, take some of the wind out of Breeden's sails. Don't let them have momentum. Let him go back to, I'm losing this fight and there's no time left. But good for Breeden getting it done. Huge cut over his eye. Had a staph infection as well. Nice one, Abu Dhabi and the UFC. Naimov versus Wood. This one actually made me angry because, Wood has reinvented himself at a higher weight class. He's smaller than almost everyone he fights now, but he's been doing fantastically. He was on a 3-fight winning streak. It takes him forever to get these together because he has like pullouts and stuff. Like him and Lerone Murphy, they were both supposed to fight each other and they both got injured or something like that. He's had a load of cancelled fights. It's like, I want this guy towards the title picture, please. And featherweight is a division where there's so little going on that he could get there quite reasonably. But Naimov, like, he kicked the dick twice in this. He grabbed the glove to stop himself getting TKO'd. He grabbed the fence to stop himself getting taken down in the first round. Not even one, he kicked the dick twice. Just getting every foul in there. And Lucas Balsacchi, the ref, just let him do it. Loads of cool stuff from Wood in this fight, like his butterfly hooks from the bottom, really lovely work. He hit a beautiful switch, I think, at the end of round 2. Hit 2 of those beautiful outside trips that we're always talking about, that Usman Nurmagomedov stole for his recent title defense in Bellator against Brent Primus. And he dinged him with some punches on the feet too. Really sad for Nathaniel Wood. Haven't heard anyone say anything about it. Haven't heard anyone ask Dana about it, but I hope they did. And I hope Dana White was like, we'll sort him out. That's stock answer when they then don't do anything. We'll take care of him. The girl with the infected pussy beat Jinyu Frey. Oh, and Sharon Magomedov, he was quite interesting. Finally got a fight in the UFC. Proved that his flicky kick's really good. His hand's a bit flappy. But this one, like, there's examples in the article, but Sharon Magomedov got going with some what we sometimes call marching combinations, where you're raising one knee and then you step through with a kick with the other, or you raise one knee and then you raise the other knee and then you kick with the first leg again. You know, you get the guy going back and worried about what's coming, and you can just sort of freestyle on him. You can riff. Except Bruno Silva worked out that he was just going to step in and kick the thigh. So there's 2 occasions in the second round and the third round. The takedown comes the same way. Magomedov picks up his knee, where Bruno Silva would normally move back. And instead of moving back, Bruno Silva stays still, and Sharon Magomedov steps through with a kick and just gets bundled over into a takedown. Did like a lot of what Sharon Magomedov was doing, though. Anyone who uses the hook kick well in MMA, love that. He used a double collar tie to get off the fence when he was wrestling. He had double collar tie, both hands behind the head, and where guys angle out and try and knee, he angled out, pushed, and threw a head kick. Loved it. From the bottom, he was using elbows really well. He was using his knees in front of Bruno Silva's chest very well. We were talking about underpassing the other day. Someone asked a technical question like, why don't we see any underpassing in MMA where you put your arm underneath the guy's leg and you walk around? And I said, elbows are an issue, and guys just sort of lose confidence there. And Magomedov kept like putting his own legs over Bruno Silva's shoulders, threatening a triangle. And Silva would be there ready to pass, and he couldn't. And he'd get elbowed in the head or hammer-fisted like 3 more times. So cautiously like Magomedov. Don't know how far he goes in the division, but he is in an exceptionally weak division. Everything 170 and above is pretty bad at the moment. So let's take a question before we get out of here for today. Dear Jack, how's life and the missus? I wanted to ask about Ankalaev. His career is a series of unfortunate events, isn't it? I love Paul Craig like most of us, but that loss was on par with Lewis versus Volkov and other thrashings gone wrong. He spent much of his career fighting for the middle tier with Kutalaba, drew with Yan, and now this. What's the deal? All the best from Hjörter. P.S. I got gifted a T2 set from my in-laws who live down under. It had Melbourne breakfast in it. Melbourne, rather. That tea that pretends to be Earl Grey and a fancy mug. No relation to the podcast. Lucky me, I don't care about tea much. I also can't get T2, but I did have the Melbourne breakfast, the official loose-leaf tea of UFC 294 while watching it. Good man. I think last time I moaned about not being able to get Melbourne breakfast because T2's left the UK. I think that was on the Boycast. But that's catching you up, guys. How's life? It's decent. I mean, felt pretty deflated after this card, if I'm honest. How's the missus? She's all right. She doesn't understand. Well, she did say that was one of the ugliest motherfuckers she's ever seen when I was watching the Magomed Sharif, the Shara Magomedov post-fight interview. And then we had a good back and forth where I was like, do you think that guy's eye works? And she was like, no, can't possibly work. But yeah, Ankalaev, he's in such a weird position. I remember Unibet asked me to write an article a few years ago about like who I think is like champ material or will be champ that isn't really getting much respect. And I said Ankalaev because this was when he'd only lost to Paul Craig. Hang on, has he? He's still only lost to Paul Craig. So yeah, he's just cursed by that. But you know, it was 2018 he lost to Paul Craig, and we were like 3 years later. And he'd racked up like 6 wins in a row, knocked out 4 of them. And still people really weren't taking him seriously. Or at least not talking about him. This one certainly doesn't help, but I would say the saving grace for light heavyweight fighters is that they will always be able to headline Apex cards. They seem to be like the go-to. And I mean, maybe it's just me being like, I fucking hate light heavyweights, but it seems like almost every card has like a top 10 light heavyweight tilt on it. I think with the thing is, like, he's not even been inactive. He fought 3 times in 2022. twice in 2021. You know, he lost a bit of his career to Ion Cutelaba with that fight and then various cancellations of that fight and then them rebooking that fight. But yeah, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what he's doing wrong because, like, it's the division where you can jump in at any point and be a title challenger. But then he did jump in for his last one as a title challenger. And he just, I don't even think he botched it. I thought it was a good fight. I still don't understand that one. Just something annoyed Dana White and Ari Emanuel, and they just decided on the night, fuck these guys, neither of them is fighting for the title now. So I don't know, but I still think he'll get there at some point, because he is just dangerous and methodical and actually pretty skilled in that division, and he hits hard. He's a great counterpuncher, good grappler. The only thing that seems to be letting him down at the moment is the low kicks, because even Johnny Walker was outstriking him with low kicks, and then like spazzy flurries off the low kicks, spazzy right hands off the low kicks. I think if he can convince people to box with him, he's great. I think if people were kicking him in the thighs, he'd probably get closer to them and hit them. But it's the low kick game has really fucked his day up. Because shin-to-shin kicks shouldn't be that damaging, but it seems like because he can't counter them, because he can't punish the guy for doing them, he just has to sit there and take them. And he doesn't want to shorten his stance and start checking, because then he'd lose that nice wide boxing base. Yeah, it's tricky. I think relying on his wrestling more would be a great shout. I think if he could use his clinch striking more effectively, I mean, I'm always calling for people to break from the clinches along the fence and punch, but I think that would be fantastically effective at that weight class where everyone's such a glass cannon. But aside from that, I think, you know, he's just got to get in the win column, but he was supposed to do that the other night and he's ruined it. So I think, you know, it is helped by the fact that he's light heavyweight and stuff has to stuff is changing all the time. You also got guys like Alexander Rakic who have just basically disappeared. I think you're not helped when you're in that division and you're not having particularly fun fights. But he is ranked number 2 underneath Yuri Prochazka. So I suppose if they don't get Jamal Hill back to fight the winner of Jiri versus Alex, it'll be Ankalaev next. As we say, there's X number of cards to deliver on every year, X number of pay-per-views that need a title fight, or ideally 2. This machine needs bodies, and Ankalaev is there ready to be the next body. Anyway, I reckon that'll do us for today. If you want to read the How Islam Makhachev Defended the Crown article, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to read the Revisiting Volk versus Makhachev 1, you can do that for free on thefightprimer.com, along with other stuff. And if you want to send me an email at any time, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. I am your boy, Jack Slack. Matt Riddle returning to MMA /bare knuckle boxing. Bless.